What is going on, Sports Wars? We're here. We're live. We barely got on air today because I just walked in this door. I'm here in Nashville. I'm on the road today. I walked in the door, opened my computer. 5 minutes later, we're ready to go for Monday evening quarterback. And it's a good thing because there's a lot of stuff to talk about, at least from the NFL standpoint this week. And certainly some interesting things went down in college as well. But before we get started, the man who is celebrating in the AM, basically, as his Giants somehow prevailed over Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers. What's up, Beardo?
Yeah, man. Yesterday was the Giants prove it game. We were a very iffy, bad 3-1. That everyone was saying we were the worst 3-1 team ever in NFL history. Getting it done yesterday in London. The Giants are undefeated in London. And a few stats for the Giants. Daniel Jones leads the league in fourth quarter comebacks with 3 so far this year. Saquon Barkley is leading the league in rushing yards. Giants looking like the real deal. Brian Daboll is looking like possibly coach of the year so far. It's still early on, but a lot of confidence in my Giants. Unfortunately, though, the NFC East, the undefeated Eagles looking very tough, and Cooper Rush, 5-0 as a starter for the Cowboys all time. So the NFC East looking very tough besides the Washington football team. But nonetheless, excited that the Giants were able to pull one out yesterday against Green Bay.
Yeah, for sure. We were watching as we were live streaming, so that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Another man who had something to celebrate, at least in college, although I don't know if he's looking forward to next week, Robert Barnes joins us again. What's going on, Robert?
Doing well. Sportspicks.locals.com is where we put up a lot of picks and free content throughout the year. You can check it out for yourselves. You can either become a member or join for free. We had, I think, 5 out of 6 profitable weeks so far. Only 1 week struggled. Now, NFL was tricky last week, so that was a little bit of a pain, but only hiccup so far this season. But, yeah, definitely, I mean, who would have guessed that, Belichick might have thanked the wrong Brian for being the head coach at the Giants, but that caused its own little controversy. But clearly they picked the right one so far. That's Giants right. 4-1, Cowboys 4-1, without Dak Prescott. There were commentaries about maybe Dak should just wait another week or two before coming back, that kind of talk. The Eagles obviously still on a roll. Kind of may have dodged a bullet there in Arizona. They missed a chip shot. Well, a relatively easy field goal in Arizona that could have pushed the game into OT. But definitely interesting week in the NFL, interesting week in college football. Is Russell Wilson the $250 million biggest contract mistake in Broncos history? Or is it Paul Hackett? Not Paul, but I remember another Hackett. Is it Hackett or is it something else? Will it just glue back together? And, we already got our first fired NFL coach just 5 weeks into the season with Matt Rhule. Yep. I think Matty Ice might put the Colts offense on ice. I think he's done and finito, despite eking out a victory against the hapless, helpless Broncos who, Russell Wilson kept throwing picks in the red zone. But, yeah, so a lot of interesting news out of both college and the NFL. My favorite stat, though, of the week is who had, if you would have said, pick the 2 of the top 3 offenses and 2 of the top 3 defenses before the season. And if I would have told you 2 of the 3 worst offenses from a yard per play perspective 5 games into the season are the defending Super Bowl contestants, Cincinnati Bengals and LA Rams. And 2 of the top 3 offenses in the NFL are the Seattle Seahawks and the lowly Detroit Lions.
Yeah, there's some shocking numbers out here in these first couple weeks of the NFL. There's no doubt about that. But we might as well start with, you already mentioned it, it doesn't really come as a surprise. Matt Rhule out as the Carolina Panthers head coach, in his 3rd year on his 3rd starting quarterback. Well, at least the 3rd one that he's handpicked for that team. They said we've seen enough and they're going to send him back to the college ranks. Beardo, you did a reaction to it here on Sports Wars. What was your take initially?
Yeah, it just there was a lot of hype surrounding Rhule. Several coaching vacancies in 2020 where a lot of these experts were very judgmental against teams who have visited with Matt Rhule, who just didn't they didn't want to go all in for it, and there was a lot of question as why. This is the guy. This is the next great NFL head coach coming from college, and then a lot of praise for Carolina for hiring the dude. And yeah, just been very lackluster. Hasn't really done anything in Carolina. 3 or 4 different quarterbacks in 2.5 years. Ran Cam Newton out of town. I want my own guy in here. I want my own guy for my system. They got Teddy Bridgewater. They got Sam Darnold. Darnold gets injured. Oh, let's bring Cam Newton back. Well, he didn't work out either, so they went and got Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield absolutely sucking this year. It was only a matter of time. I don't think anybody was really surprised. It was a long time coming for Matt Rhule. Unfortunately for him, I hope he can find a new, maybe he's going to be the next Nebraska head coach. But, yeah.
Well, if we look at it, college is not the place to find an NFL coach in the modern era. Consider legends, college football legends that have been hired in the NFL since 2000. Steve Spurrier, Chip Kelly, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, all disasters in the NFL. They just didn't work at all. So why did they think Rhule was going to be an exception, especially when you looked at what Rhule's MO was at Temple and Baylor and his prior stops? He's really good at building a college program, not by recruiting talent, not by being uniquely persuasive, not by being an offensive guru, but by being a guy who spots talent and develops it. That's not what you do in the NFL. NFL is about scheme. It's about matchups. It's about handling personalities in the locker room, things that in college you don't have to worry about. Nick Saban has control over his locker room. Urban Meyer can recruit all the criminals he wants. Florida, nobody else is going to do anything about it, right? You can't kick punter kickers, or kickers are not to be kicked in the NFL or other personnel, as Urban Meyer was up to. You can play around with all the hot chicks you want in college football. Nobody's going to rat you out. NFL, different ballgame. So I think the Matt Rhule should go back to college. Now, he's got a $40 million buyout. We live in a unique era where these coaches are given guaranteed jobs for life, that even if they're fired early, they still get paid as if they're still there. $40 million to be a screw-up. I mean, what a gig. So I don't blame Rhule for taking it. I know Rhule thinks of himself as a pro coach. I never thought of him as a pro coach. I thought he's a great college development coach. Put him in a program like the joke was at Carolina. Matt Rhule was 10-0 when he held his opponents under 17 points. It's just tough to do that in the NFL, and he was 1-17 when he didn't. When he faced a competent offense, the guy couldn't win. Now that where that probably works, Big Ten West. He's a natural fit in a place like Nebraska. Natural fit. I think Wisconsin's probably going to go with Jim Leonard after Leonard keeps on a roll. But if they don't, Matt Rhule would fit perfectly in a place like Wisconsin. It's all about talent development, where you have complete carte blanche control over the college campus, where you're not going to be subject to certain kinds of scrutiny. Or he may sit out. He's got $40 million to play with. Might party, Key Largo or wherever else for Key West, wherever he wants to go. Do a few TV gigs and then come back in a year or two to see if something really big, really prestigious. Depends on whether his ego is as big as Russell Wilson's as to where he ends up next. But he belongs in college.
Yeah, I agree. He's a college guy, and we do see this from time to time. I imagine he'll go back and do well. I don't even think he's one of those guys that needs to do the Nick Saban rehab stint. I don't see him as one of those guys because of how successful he was at Baylor and then leaving. I think some people are going to be willing to plug him right back in. But, yeah, you're right. With $40 million, he can just take a year. He can take 2 years and just go golfing and hang out and, see where everything goes. Now, I don't know if there's any stipulations with that buyout, where if he does go work somewhere else before that would be up, that they might have to pay a portion of it. I heard a rumor floating around that might be part of that deal. But at the end of the day, these colleges don't give a fuck about this money. They really don't. They're just throwing it all around at this point. So, yes, Baker Mayfield, I guess I don't know if they're going to stick with him. I don't know what's going to happen in Carolina, but definitely chaos to surprise a nobody.
Carolina also fired their defensive coordinator today, too. It wasn't just Matt Rhule. They said, heck with it. You're out here. You're out, too.
And him and Matt Rhule have been together like forever, their entire careers. So that was probably a thing where they weren't going to keep him on anyway. I'm not sure what went down behind the scenes, if they asked him if he wanted to stay, because that defense hasn't been terrible. Definitely better than the offense has been for sure. But, yeah, that guy's going to go where Matt Rhule goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the Panthers over 16 points, and they managed to still only score 15. So, yeah, the offense is the problem.
Oh, man. Well, speaking of offensive problems, we have to talk about Thursday Night Football because we haven't talked about that yet here with Robert. And that was one of the worst games maybe we've seen. At least that was a primetime nationally televised team in terms of offensive proficiency. And it was all field goals the entire time. And instead
It could have been worse. You could have had the over like I did.
Oh, that is maybe the worst bet of the worst
yeah,
bet of the
absolutely.
week.
It was a sign of where the weekend was going. I think there were like 9 trips in scoring range, and they managed to come up with 7 field goals. It was just abysmal.
Well, and of course, the entire talk has been about Russell Wilson after the fact. This team has not looked good. The 2 wins that the Broncos have on the season, they've scored 16 points and 11 points respectively. They did put up points in one of their games. Was it the Texans win? I think maybe they put up some decent point. Or sorry, no, it was a loss that they put up points in.
Well, see, I mean, Seattle, they moved the ball fine.
There it was, Seattle. Yeah,
couldn't manage the fourth. Couldn't manage the last part of it.
Yeah, but he's getting booed in the first quarter. Fans are leaving the building before overtime starts. Now they suddenly announce a mysterious Russell Wilson injury that nobody knew about. But don't worry, he's not going to miss any time. He just had to get treatment because his shoulder's bugging him. So that's a good excuse for Russell Wilson. You as a Denver fan, these people are not normal people anyway. They're kind of chaotic. They're kind of maniacs in Denver when it comes to their football and the demand for a quarterback. But it is through the charts right now. And a lot of people are looking at $245 million and thinking, what did we just do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Pete Carroll's probably right. I remember this debate a couple of years ago when Russell Wilson got off that huge start. I think it was the COVID season, and they were talking about MVP and all the rest. And a lot of the analytics people, including Warren Sharp, who's very well respected in NFL circles, had argued for years that if you would just let Wilson loose, he would put up huge numbers. I was on the opposite side. I'd seen Wilson play all the way back to his NC State days before he transferred to Wisconsin in Madtown. And if you looked at him, he excelled in a power run offense where he could bootleg, where he could scramble and throw that beautiful deep ball. And when he had guys like Lockett and others who were great at catching those deep balls, that's where he excelled. He fancies himself as Tom Brady, as Drew Brees, as Peyton Manning. He ain't. He's never been. And Pete Carroll went along with him that year, unleashed the offense, but there was really good film review that was pointing out at the time by a range of analysts, if you look at this, this is only working because teams keep expecting to see the old Seattle, and they don't believe that this is and that's why players were opening to put up big stats. The Buffalo Bills made an adjustment. There's a big article about this in the Atlantic a year or two ago. Not the Atlantic, the Athletic. And they pointed out that he threw 4 picks in that game. And that's when Pete Carroll was like, this is what I was always worried about. And Carroll started to try to pull back the reins. Wilson was enraged. That's why he was demanding a trade, because he wants to go out. He wants everybody to know he's as good as the greats. He's great in his own right, but he's a system guy. He needs to stick within that system. A range of film guys were pointing this out preseason. Hackett is a first-year coach, is not going to step on Wilson. He admitted that last play actually had a run play called, but that Wilson checked out of it to the pass play and then missed the wide open receiver. And Richard Sherman was ripping on him again, which he's been doing all year long. RG3 was even ripping on him. But they're like 4th and 1 and don't run the ball. Where have I does that ring
before?
A bell?
Yeah.
Super Bowl.
Oh, I mean, he was having an aneurysm on the sideline for Prime on Thursday night. It was
post-traumatic stress disorder.
How did this happen again?
Yes.
That was post Super Bowl loss distress disorder. And it's just because that's not Wilson's strong point. He doesn't want to run this year. He doesn't want to scramble. He doesn't want to bootleg. He doesn't want to rely on a power run game. He just wants to throw it up. And what he didn't realize is a lot of those times when he would just throw it up like he did last week in prior seasons, nobody was there because they were all cheating against the run or cheating against him running. So now they're not, because they know he's not. And he looks like a very pedestrian quarterback. Definitely not a $250 million quarterback. If he can swallow his pride and go back to, like, people broke down the tape, there were a lot of wide open receivers. It's not all Hackett.
Oh, yeah.
Hackett's offense was creating plenty. He missed Jerry Jeudy badly on a play that should have been a touchdown pass in that game. Other plays, I mean, he missed the Hamler on what should have been a winning touchdown had he just not locked into one receiver. But, these are, if he will just adjust and accept that the only way he's going to excel is to go back to a Carroll-style offense at some level. Not as run-obsessed necessarily as Carroll was, but more like that, and run more and scramble more, which means, maybe he is finished at 40 rather than 45 like he's talking about. then he can put up good numbers. But also, I think the booing is clearly hitting his head because some of those throws were just terrible throws. He was desperate to be a hero. And Broncos moved the ball okay between the 20s. They would get close to scoring range and be interception, missed the opportunity, stopped on downs, etc. And you look at them statistically, yard per play, they're middle of the pack in the NFL. But they're the second worst scoring offense in the NFL. It's because they have the worst red zone performance of anybody, and it's because Wilson's trying to throw the ball too much. And so if he doesn't want to, we'll see what the great ones do. Take Peyton Manning's last year. Manning realized that towards the end of the year before, there were signs that he had suffered that sudden quarterback collapse that we've talked about before. Quarterbacks don't steadily decline; they just boom, they drop. Matt Ryan. That's clearly happened with the Colts. If you watch him, he's just delayed in reaction to everything. That's why the Colts are DOA, despite winning last.
And one of the problems in Atlanta was that offensive line was fucking terrible in Atlanta. We thought that was going to get better with the Colts. Their O-line is shredded with injuries. Like he had no time in that.
And he's just not in a position. He's like a half a second slow watching him. But what did Manning do towards the end of this when he came back after he'd been benched that year?
He realized Brock Osweiler play.
Yeah, exactly. Osweiler started ahead of him. He comes back in, and if you watched him, the reason why I bet on the Broncos that whole playoff run is Manning realized, okay, I can't do what I used to do. So he started doing one read and done. If his first read was right, he threw it. If it wasn't, he would just dump it off, and that's it. And he wasn't trying to be the old Peyton Manning because he realized something in his body was not clicking quick enough to do what he used to do. And what happened? He rode it to a Super Bowl because he cared more about getting a Super Bowl than looking like the great Peyton Manning of most of his career. If Russell Wilson can swallow his pride, which is what great ones are capable of doing, then he can get back and the Broncos can be back in the playoff hunt. If he doesn't, it'll be one of the greatest all-time disastrous $250 million contracts in NFL history.
What's your take, Beardo?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Robert, that it's not so much Hackett as it is Russell Wilson being a little bit he's very egotistical. He believes that he's worth $250 million. And as far as the Broncos paying him that much money, I think if the Broncos are going to move on from somebody, they're going to move on from Hackett first. And I could see that Hackett could very well easily, now I don't know if they'll get rid of him in this year one, but if the struggles continue and the Broncos have a losing record at the end of the season, I can totally see them parting ways with Hackett after the very first year rather than moving on from Russell Wilson. But it's funny, we were talking about college coaches who just simply weren't cut out for the NFL. Pete Carroll is kind of like the one lone standout. I mean, he had an NFL stint before with the Patriots.
That was the key. He was an NFL guy who briefly coached in college.
Went back to college and then back in the NFL. And you're looking at Geno Smith's stats this year. Geno Smith, and then you kind of look at Russell Wilson's success in Seattle. Now you're looking what Geno Smith, the kind of numbers that he's doing, following the system, believing in Pete Carroll's system. Yeah, he has DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. They just lost one of their running backs for the rest of the season, but you kind of, when you connect the dots and you see how well Geno Smith is doing and how Russell Wilson used to play in Seattle, now Russell Wilson struggles without Pete Carroll, thinking that he is this guy. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah, it is, and I think Russell Westbrook or Russell Wilson, they're almost interchangeable right now for me because we've been talking so much about the problems right now surrounding some of them. But for Russell Wilson, I feel like he's got a mental problem. I do think there's something weird about the guy. That's why you're seeing so much of this cringe shit come out. And it's always been there. It's always been a part of Russell Wilson, but it feels like it's just being exposed so much now. The different way that he talks when he's in a situation where he thinks he needs to be straight up and professional and he sounds white, for lack of a better term, versus when he does something on his TikTok and it's with his like coworker or the people who are working for him and they're all black.
Posse,
he sounds like a completely different person. Like there's something weird about this guy. And I going into a new locker room like that, getting paid all that money, new team, new city, all this shit, all these expectations, you have to imagine that that's weighing a lot and potentially affecting what's going on with him right now. In terms of the injury, they've come out, they've said he's got basically a strained lat, right? So he's going to keep playing. They'd say it's not bad enough. He needs to rest it, but he's not going to rest it. I don't know if that's legit or if that's a fucking excuse, to be honest with you, to take a little bit of the pressure off of him. but
It
maybe
sounds like a narcissistic excuse. But what do you think about
bit.
the chat suggestion that the Broncos bring back Tim Tebow?
God. That's what Broncos fans like legitimately wanted for forever. Peyton Manning was throwing 50 fucking touchdowns and he'd go 3 and out. And some of these fucking idiots at Mile High Stadium would be chanting to bring Tebow back. But hey, if they could win with Brock Osweiler, I guess they could win with anybody, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that was that Gary Kubiak effect. I mean, the Gary Kubiak and his assistants made a lot of quarterbacks a lot of money because they made them look a lot better than they were without him.
That team was also stacked, though. I mean, the running backs, you had Sean Marino and C.J. Anderson. That one postseason where C.J. Anderson was just running through everybody. You had DT, Owen Daniels at tight end, and because they had moved on from Julius Thomas, he got paid from Jacksonville. You had Owen Daniels, DT, other guys like Eric Decker. This team was just so stacked, too. So, yeah, you could have put, Trevor Siemian in there, and he might have looked halfway decent. But
when you have that solid based zone blocking zone run scheme that they have going on, and all of a sudden you have to account for that so much as a defense, it opens things up for these masters.
I mean, we're seeing it. I mean, the Dolphins. They call it the Shanahan offense. It's not. It's the Kubiak offense that kid Shanahan has taken. But you look at it, it's excelled consistently in the NFL. It's where Carolina should have gone. That go with a smart, creative, offensive coach, more off the, I call it the Kubiak tree. People call it the Shanahan tree. Than honestly the Andy Reid tree, which has been a little bit hit or miss. Because some of that's unique to, because Andy Reid doesn't really run a system. He's just a genius offensive mind. But it's not that the system really works if you know how to plug in the personnel well. They make a lot of average quarterbacks look good. Was that system at San Francisco who cost Matt Rhule his job last week. But, speaking of backup quarterbacks, what is it with New England that they always find some late round draft pick that comes out and puts up big stats like Zappi did from I think Western Kentucky? Wasn't that where he was at last year? He looked like a good quarterback last. In fact, they're in the top 10 offensively right now in yards per play.
He looked halfway decent the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. I heard someone say that Bailey Zappi looks like just a person. He looks like someone they'd cast to play Mac Jones in a Hallmark remake of his life or something. Like they look like very shockingly similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were talking about it a little bit before. This Detroit Lions team had been essentially the number one offense, had been putting up a ton of points. Granted, their defense looked like shit. But you couldn't deny that they were making plays both in the pass game and in the run game. And New England shut them out. Bill Belichick schemed, and Jared Goff was unable to adjust. The coaches were unable to adjust.
Yeah, that's a classic Belichick MO. I mean, he's the one that kind of ended Goff's reign at the Rams by what he did to them in the Super Bowl, being replicated in the successive seasons that led to him having to be shipped to Detroit. And these scheme kind of driven systems where now there are two things. One is it's also scheme-driven systems rely on the unique talent they have, whether it's a Deebo Samuels at one place or somebody else at another place. And it's clear that, without Amon-Ra Brown, without DeAndre Swift, that offense, was going to be handicapped. But it's still, Belichick is just one of those guys that exposes the weakness of those schemes. And the question is, will we see a replica of that? Will Detroit start coming back to earth if teams start replicating what Belichick did, much as they did the last time Belichick ruined Goff's career?
Yeah, and that's another coach that, unfortunately, because I personally like Dan Campbell. I think he's got a good attitude. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's a good motivator. He's more of a player's coach than Matt Rhule ever was. And personally, having watched Hard Knocks this past preseason, I grew to like Dan Campbell. And it's just unfortunate if the Lions don't step up, they're going to cost Dan Campbell a job. Dan Campbell, he'll get another NFL gig, whether it's an offensive coordinator or a assistant head coach. But man, I really like Dan Campbell in Detroit, but unfortunately, he could be one of the next coaches to get the boot coming soon.
I like him too, but you also do have to look at what's happened and how many tight games have they lost over the past 2 years. The man
who lost on the 66-yard field goal.
Yeah. And, if it was just that one, you're like, well, shit, that sucks. But it's been a lot of, last second, last 2 minute, last play of the game type of losses for them. And at some point you have to wonder what's going on? Like what's the problem with the decision making there? Do you have the right people in place for these strategies? And I like Dan Campbell too, but maybe they look at that positively, right? Even though they've got a bad record, look at how they've been competing in some of these games. Maybe you can look at it from that aspect.
Well, they're cursed. They're twice cursed, actually. They got the Barry Sanders curse. Now they have the Calvin Johnson curse working against them too. They're just a cursed city in a shit city, and they're just a cursed franchise. So I mean, Dan Campbell doing what he can against this twice cursed franchise.
Yeah. And Game On Sports News and Picks for $10 says it was also Detroit's first game outside this season. Something to keep an eye on this year. That's true. I will say from what I was watching the game, it looked like beautiful conditions. But yeah, certainly there's some quarterbacks. Look at Drew Brees' career historically and the difference when he was outside versus inside. So
yeah,
certainly. Also,
the Kyler Murray stat is getting even worse against that Call of Duty Warzone double XP week.
Man, Kyler Murray in the Arizona Cardinals, they did cover, I think, because
they did.
Yeah.
And they were a field goal away from OT, and I think they would. And from a statistical perspective, they outplayed the Eagles in that game. Eagles got off to a hot start. Then the rest of the game, Cardinals really kind of dominated. And I think they're starting to hit some rhythm. We'll see. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is back next week?
I think so. Well, he's 6 games, right? So
yeah. Week 7.
One more game, yeah.
Yeah, so not this week, coming week, but I think the week after that he's back. We'll see if that kicks him into a second gear, and you get a reverse effect of that head coach. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury's usually been great in the first half of the season, terrible in the second half. Maybe it'll be the inverse this year. And at times they did look better, but it is weird that curse. It's one of those. It's like when you hear these odd betting trends, so and so playing at this time, but it's like Kirk Cousins, right?
Kirk
Can't
Cousins,
play at night,
yeah.
But it seems like it's always true. Or all these night games. There's like a freakish run now of night games going under. And this year it's been crazy. I mean, get way under in some of these night games. Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night games, 12-11, 12-9. Now, 2 of those fall the Broncos. But so we'll see how it folds out. But, yeah, it's fascinating how that can work. But I think, Kyler Murray needs to get going. And if he doesn't get going once Hopkins is back, then maybe, I don't know how long, the shine might be off in Arizona.
The problem is they just gave him a bunch of fucking money. That's the problem. Like, they just paid this guy a shit ton. They put in his contract, hey, we need to make sure that you practice, Kyler. Hey, make sure you study film, Kyler. Make sure you do some homework.
And he bitched about it, and they took it out.
That's racist, right? That's racist to do that. So then they give it to the backlash and take it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's not faith in your quarterback. How are you giving him that much money if you can't reasonably trust him to do the work that it takes? And Beardo brought it up. Call of Duty double XP weekend or Call of Duty event weekend. This guy's clearly spent a lot of time playing Call of Duty. And he spent more time picking out what he was going to wear than he did actually studying the film. With all that being said, they still had an opportunity to win, and Kyler Murray fucking slid before he got a first down for no reason, which then, because Cliff Kingsbury didn't think there was any way in hell that his quarterback would slide before he got a first down, was shouting, spike it, spike it, spike it. So he went down and spiked it instead of trying to get a first down, trying to get more yards. And they ended up missing that kick at the end. What a fucking mess.
His eyesight was off from staring at the monitor. The blue light was affecting his eyes. But you're playing the Eagles, and he shows up wearing a Kelly green full-blown suit. Like, what are you thinking, Kyler? You're showing up wearing your enemy's colors.
He looked like Hillary Clinton.
just a baggy rag.
Yeah, he looked rough.
We know looked okay last week, and his offense actually is not terrible. Not good, but not terrible. The Bears made a nice comeback against the Vikings. Weren't able to pull it off in the end, but they're not looking awful. Looking respectable.
Justin Fields had a couple decent throws in that game, like actual NFL throws, not just there happens to be 9 in the box once again. Let me just fucking chuck it up for somebody. He did make a couple nice throws. At the end of the day, the Vikings played so well that first half. And I've seen the Vikings do that before. Like, just they'll go out lightning quick and then they'll just shut it off until the very end. And that's what happened. The Bears were able to force them to make a play at the end. I never felt like the Bears were going to win that game ever. And Kirk Cousins had a 1:00 game, and that's good for him because he plays like Joe Montana at 1:00 games. He started off the game like 17 for 17 or something.
Yes. Yep.
Justin Jefferson had a great game too.
It's certain quarterbacks survived last week with some very interesting officiating.
We might as well talk about Tom Brady. That was the controversy. The second week in a row, however, that Jerome Boger has been involved in a questionable roughing the passer call that definitely affected the game and the momentum and potentially even the outcome of the game. Last week, it was a bullshit call for roughing the passer when Josh Allen got hit. And this week, it was for Tom Brady. Now, what I will say, Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, they got off to a great start. We're looking good, looking dominant. And then Atlanta just came and came and came. Ended up being down 6 in the fourth quarter. And Atlanta forced a 3-and-out, sacked Tom Brady. And then out of nowhere, a late roughing the passer call. When I saw it, I saw him get whipped. And I was like, hey, they do look for that sometimes if you do whip them down to the ground, especially with all the
especially after the Tua stuff.
Craziness going on right now.
Yep.
And he gets the call. Robert, as someone who's watched a lot of sports with the intention to place money on it and has a nose for things, I've already heard some things about Jerome Boger today. What do you think?
Well, I thought it was a Tom Brady call for sure. I'll put it this way. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, maybe one or two other guys get that call in the league, but that's it. Because when I saw it, I didn't see anything wrong with it. And then I saw the replay. I was like, okay, I could see maybe some. I saw Brady was mad at how he got taken down, but I was like, that's just not what's intended for the purpose of the rule. That you can't now even really sack the quarterback, because that's how it seemed to come across to me. And I just thought that was whether it has other factors or not. It was a call that only and let's face it, Brady's got plenty of those in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
100%.
And I thought that's what that was. That was protecting the NFL's star quarterback. And maybe that's a smart decision, from a marketing business perspective. But I didn't think it was the correct call. And it would have been interesting, if Atlanta had got the ball back and did something with it, because they were without Kyle Pitts in that game. They were without Patterson in that game. Took them a little while for their offense to adjust, but they were really rolling in that fourth quarter. So if they'd got the ball back, might have been a different outcome in the game. And Tampa's offense is Brady still is good, not like some of the early games in the season, but not exactly like that great or good offensive game against the Chiefs. But how much the Chiefs were playing lack defense because they had such a big lead is an open question. But it was not the best second game to come. And Atlanta's defense was not supposed to be good this year, and I don't think they are that great. So I'm still wondering how much of Brady, some of his frustration with that, other things, the offense is still not clicking like it was last season, put it that way.
Yeah. Just yesterday's game, there was a lot of bad officiating in that Buccaneers game yesterday. The Bucs were on a second quarter 2-minute drive. They were under the 2 minutes, and they were driving. Now, I wasn't particularly aware of this rule, but it had been explained that the defense cannot make substitutions if the offense is in a no-huddle 2-minute offense, under 2 minutes to go in either the second quarter or the fourth quarter. And the refs totally let the Falcons make a substitution, and Brady was there bitching the whole time about it. It was actually the difference between the Bucs going for a touchdown on a fourth down to them having to bring out their field goal unit. And Brady was furious with it, and then they had to bring on, I think his name was Dean Blangino or whatever it is, their expert in New York, and he said, yeah, the refs fucked up on this one. And it's like, so many of these issues with the refs fucking up has been happening this season, prior seasons. Personally, I think these refs need to be held accountable, whether it's the loss of a paycheck or that they can't ref the next game or losing out on a playoff opportunity. You can't ref in the Super Bowl because you had this many fuck-ups in the regular season. But that just very bad officiating yesterday in that Buccaneers game.
To the chatter's question, what do you think? Who's the next to get laid, Brady or Giselle?
Oh God,
I heard Zach Wilson already's got Giselle's number.
that's true. There's no doubt about it. That's why Zach Wilson's balling out right now.
Yeah.
But when it does come to Brady, those things happen. We've seen him get calls like that. I do think the Tua stuff, I think people are going to be extra careful. There's so much like visibility right now on the concussion stuff, on quarterback concussions. We saw the Miami game affected by that. Lamar Jackson, or not Lamar Jackson, Teddy Bridgewater takes a shot-ish, and they're like, hey, we think that for 1 second we may have seen you look like you're concussed. So you're going to be out for the game. Even though you passed all the concussion protocol, this happened in the first quarter, you're out for the game. Send in your third string guy. That's such a fucking overreaction. And it's exactly what we talked about this on Sunday before the games actually kicked off. We talked about this. And sure enough, in that Miami game, we immediately see the effects. And when it comes back to Jerome Boger, this is a guy who his crew, I think, was pulled from the playoffs last year. I don't know if you remember that, but there was some controversy surrounding Jerome Boger. I don't know if it was whether they missed some really bad calls, but his team got taken out of the playoff rotation because of some mistakes from his crew. So maybe he's not a guy that they're going to let do the playoffs, but he's still one of the guys that's in rotation. 2 weeks in a row, same fucking ref, same fucking flag, affected the game. That's going to send everybody who thinks the NFL is rigged crazy when you have stuff happen like that.
Yeah.
Did get a super chat from Ryan Boudon for $10. Between the two contracts, Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, which team do you think regrets their decision more? I can't stand either of them. So both so cringe. When Murray shows up in a dress, come on, man.
I mean, I think that it will be the Broncos because their fan base is much more rabid than the Cardinals if Wilson doesn't turn it around.
Yeah,
in terms of fan base outrage.
I'd agree with that. I think Denver is probably more so has buyer's remorse than the
they're
Cardinals organization.
They're booing him at home already. It's game 5, so that gives you an idea. Kyler Murray has a much longer leash because they have lower expectations in Phoenix.
Yeah, I think so too. And Kyler Murray is a known entity, I guess. Like he's been there a while. Russell Wilson had never played a game before he came there and got that money. And they had to give up. It's not just the money; it's the fucking picks. They had to give up so much to get him.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And when you put a side-by-side of Drew Lock's first 5 games in Denver and a side-by-side of Russell Wilson's first 5 games in Denver and the amount of money that you're paying Drew Lock has had a better first 5 games in Denver in his career than Russell Wilson has. For a lot cheaper, too.
And then you see Geno Smith putting up stats like he has in Seattle.
Yep.
That doesn't look good for Russell.
Yeah.
He's still married to what's-her-name, though, right? So it's not like life's all bad.
Well, she's going to leave for future if he keeps playing like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Will M for $5. I don't know how you're supposed to sack a quarterback if that isn't it. Cheers, gents. I need 19 fantasy points from Hilaire tonight to get to 5-0 and points leader. Well,
good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Hopefully you get a touchdown in there. You get a touchdown, and I think that's a definite possibility. If you're in a PPR league at least, definite possibility for 19 if he does score tonight.
It is interesting that –
Total's almost kind of low, like 51, 52, and I think it's because of the night thing. Because Kansas City's coming off whatever that was, 70-something points. You got Vegas can put up a lot of points, and but I think bettors are scared of this night curse on totals because it's around 51, 52. I thought it'd be 54, 55, something like that. Given the Kansas City's offense, that's in my view not so much Mahomes. That's Andy Reid. That you can lose Tyreek Hill, replace him with players that their other programs weren't really competing to keep, and you're putting up comparable stats. That's impressive. But Vegas needs to get off the schneid if they're going to try to make any kind of playoff run and not sink into 1-4 range in his first season there in Vegas.
I did think it was interesting that the Chiefs were only, the 7-point favorites at home, and I know that it's a divisional game, but 7 points at home against the Raiders, who have not been very good this year, something fishy about that line right there, and I think that the Raiders could sneak away with one in Kansas City tonight.
Depends which Chiefs team shows up. Is it one that's engaged and ready to play like they were against Tampa Bay, or is it the team that showed up against the Colts? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, if they're locked and loaded and ready to roll, like they probably will be for a divisional game, yeah, I think Chiefs are going to take it to the Raiders tonight for sure. But back to some stuff that did happen on Sunday. I did want to talk about the Cowboys because Cooper Rush. Who cares about Dak Prescott anymore? You got Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush 4-0 this year as a starter, 5-0 in his career as a starting quarterback now, and the Cowboys look solid. They're not winning games 10-7, right? That offense at times can move the ball. There's some effective pocket passing from Cooper Rush to some of these wide receivers out there, and they beat up on the Rams. The Rams once again. Only 10 points from the Rams, and that's including like an 80-yard or 70-yard Cooper Kupp screen for a touchdown. So they have to be wondering what the fuck are we doing right now?
Yeah, they and the Bengals are showing systemic problems. That first game of the year when Bengals lost at home to the Steelers, which looks really bad right now, given Kenny Pickett wasn't lighting up the scoreboard in Buffalo at all. That game was a blowout, and
I'm glad my man Mitch Trubisky got a bad rap. He's not very good, but he's better than Kenny Pickett is. Okay, so I'm glad.
And then you look at the Rams. I mean, that some of that was testament to the Bills' defense, but we've seen the problems reoccur. I mean, they only put up 20 at Arizona. They put up 9 against the 49ers. That offense is just not clicking, and they need to have that running game working for the passing game to be working, or Matt Stafford starts making mistakes. And so I think that I just think it's going to be a down year for the Rams. But testament to the Cowboys for getting to 4-1 without Dak Prescott. I mean, that's not what anybody had in the book, along with the Giants. I mean, what looked like the worst division in football is right now, from a record perspective, one of the most competitive divisions in football. So we'll see, if that keeps up. But it puts pressure on Prescott when and if he comes back. I mean, when he comes back, that he's got to maintain it. Well, what happens if he comes back and they lose 3 in a row and they look
Cooper
like they
Rush
did
time, baby?
I don't think he has that kind of leash. I don't think he has that kind of leash. Jerry Jones has proven that he doesn't really necessarily care about how much the player is getting paid. He's got an endless amount of money. He wants to win. He wants to win, and he wanted to win yesterday. He wanted to win years ago. And if Cooper Rush is undefeated and he's putting up these numbers, I mean, there's already been word going around that Dak Prescott has been wanting to come back early because he fears that Cooper Rush, the Cooper Rush hype, that Dak Prescott, that door is slowly closing on his time in Dallas. And with just Jerry Jones' personality and wanting to win, having an endless amount of money, not caring about how much he's paying Dak Prescott, he wants to win, and he'll put the cheaper guy out there if they're winning. So I mean, Jerry Jones has even said, "Hey, no, Dak, take your time healing up that thumb, Dak. Take your time." But it's because he wants to see Cooper Rush, and he's liking his team winning right now.
NFL history is littered with teams that had starting quarterbacks. This is my guy. We're going to pay this guy. He's our guy going forward. Team captain. Well, they get injured, and then somebody else comes in. Maybe a Tom Brady. I don't know. Maybe a Dak Prescott.
Yeah, happened to Dak Prescott.
This happens. This is how it happens more often than not.
Yep.
Is the starter goes down with injury, somebody else comes in, and they never look back. Look what happened to Justin Herbert. Now, obviously, Tyrod Taylor was not ever going to be like the long-term guy there, but Tyrod Taylor gets his lung punctured by a fucking team doctor on the sideline. Justin Herbert comes in, never looks back. So Dak Prescott got to wonder.
Kurt Warner, Trent Green, and then even I mean Drew Bledsoe being on the butt end of that with Brady, and then again with Romo, because he was in Dallas when he got injured, and then Romo went in, and they never looked back.
Yeah. So
it's really all about white supremacy. That's all that's happening.
It must be. According to, I don't know if you saw this, Robert. I did a video a couple days ago. An MSNBC analyst, God, I forget her name. Something Cross. Kelly Cross? Something Cross. But she said that Tua's concussion it's not good to watch Tua's concussion because you got these black bodies that are getting banged up out there, black bodies who are getting concussed, while the white coaches stand there and watch. Only problem being Tua is not black, and the coach isn't white. So don't know exactly what you're race baiting for there.
Man.
Other than it's just MSNBC.
They can't help themselves.
We did have a game that came right down to the wire last night, Sunday Night Football. But luckily for the Ravens, as they've said so many times, we have Justin Tucker. And Justin Tucker, when it's all said and done, may go down as the best kicker of all time. Obviously, when you're looking at clutch situations, some of the things that Adam Vinatieri did throughout the course of his career, pretty insane. He also got put there because of the teams he was on and had the opportunity to do those things. But Justin Tucker is insane and phenomenal and pretty much money anytime he goes out there, even from 66 yards away. But he did kick a last-second field goal to put the Ravens over the Bengals. I thought that the Ravens would stick it to the Bengals a little more. We saw the Ravens offense really shine the first couple weeks of the season. Lamar Jackson contract year, he was talking about money the whole offseason, very confident. All of a sudden, that offense has started to stall out a little bit and has not looked as impressive, although they do come away with the win.
Yeah, I think that, credit to Jackson making the big run at the end that helped set up the field goal. The Bengals got a great defensive coordinator, so they're really good at scheming. And the Ravens are such a scheme-oriented offense. It's not just that they line up and beat you man on man. It's using Lamar Jackson's unique talent, but in a scheme that at times can implode if the right defensive matchup hits them. But the Bengals should have won that game earlier when they had 4th and goal at the 1-yard line. And these coaches that love to run these weird trick plays right close to the end zone, I do not understand. Mark Richt used to do that at Georgia. There's some other people did. So, they got, you got Jamar Chase. You got people you can throw the ball to. Burrow is a very athletic quarterback. And instead you set up like a weird fake the run, then fake a pass, and then try to do a shovel pass in the middle of a very congested defense. And shock, it doesn't work. It's like that, usually if you're rotating out, that kind of play can work. But I don't like trick plays right on the goal line of that nature. And I think that blew it. But they still have systematic problems. But we talked about a few weeks ago that their offense, just looking beneath the hood, the metrics are bad. And the metrics, just like the Rams, are bad. It's about 4 yards per play. Some of the second worst in the league through 5 games. This is no longer a small 1-2 game sample size. This is a continuous, consistent problem. Now, T. Higgins was out for most of that game, but Burrow just holds the ball too long, and it's not just the offensive line. He just holds it too long, and there's other aspects of that offense that are just not clicking correctly. That I think I don't even think they'll make the playoffs this year out of the AFC.
Oof.
Robert,
that's a definite Super Bowl slump right there.
Yeah. Last weekend, Ravens-Bills. Did you see the Marcus Peters and John Harbaugh fiasco there, them butting heads? Did you see that? And I want to know what you think about it since we didn't talk to you last week.
I didn't see it. Peters was it doesn't surprise me. Peters is he's a classic old school cornerback. So he's very talkative, very communicative, isn't shy or bashful about anything. And you want that at a corner. You want somebody who's loud and uber confident, because even after they screw up, because otherwise, they're going. He was up against Jamar Chase most of the night and won a lot of those battles. So I don't mind a corner being vocal. It was like Randy Moss as a wide receiver. It was like, I kind of want people to be so uber competitive they're yelling at everybody on the sidelines. I don't mind that in those kind of positions. You don't necessarily want your quarterback to do it. You want your quarterback to lead the team, not always be screaming at everybody. But right. I don't mind your wide receivers, your corners, your positions that are really confidence dependent, where if you lose your confidence, you're going to lose your ability. I don't mind those guys being arrogant asses. They need to back it up, not be like Antonio Brown and flashing random people in a pool like he was doing recently. Not that kind of cuckoo, but be just crazy enough to be competitive.
Yeah, and it was like he did have to get held back from going after John Harbaugh because they didn't want to trust the defense, and it cost him the game, all that stuff. But yeah, those things do happen, and it's always interesting to see how it plays out next game and how it affects people the next game. Same with any scuffle you have. Whether it comes to baseball, basketball, anything. Anytime a team has a moment like that where they're butting heads and there's some strife, it can be beneficial. It can help them work through things, or it can have the opposite effect and really fucking destroy a weak locker room and a weak team.
Yeah.
Somebody asked in the chat, would I take Randy Moss over Deion Sanders? They might not remember Deion was called Neon Deion for a reason. Deion was many things, but bashful was not one of them.
Well, so we had an argument on the last Sports Wars.
I'm sure they asked that because of yesterday morning.
Yeah, that's why they asked. We had an argument where I said that I think Randy Moss is better than Deion Sanders because I think Randy Moss is probably the second best wide receiver to ever play.
That's a close. It would have been awesome to see those guys go up against each other. I mean, because Moss has the great height advantage, smooth, just pure smooth, great ball location skills, which is very underrated.
Yeah,
So I love to watch him play. He originally started out at Florida State, got into trouble. That's why he transferred back to Marshall. Probably should have won the Heisman, which was stolen from Peyton Manning that year. It was also stolen from Randy Moss that year. So I wouldn't have had a problem if Moss got it over Manning. I had a problem with Charles Woodson, who got torched for almost 200 yards by David Boston, not exactly an NFL star from Ohio State that year, and somehow gets it because ABC and ESPN love to promote the Big Ten. But that's a random rant on a random topic. But that would be a heck of a – I think that would be a heck of a competition. I mean, that'd be a pay-to-watch, in their day kind of competition. It didn't happen because of the age overlap difference. But those guys were both great fun to watch on the field. I don't know if
Deion's such a great – I mean, probably one of arguably the best cover guy we've ever seen straight up cover.
I mean, people would refuse. In the peak of his career, they just didn't throw his direction. You had the 100%. Best quarterbacks in the league not even throw at all near Deion Sanders.
100%.
Now, Russell Wilson should remember that against Stephon Gilmore.
Yes.
He kept finding whoever Gilmore was guarding and throwing it right there.
Well, and he'd throw it late, too. Like you said, he would throw it super late. My thing with Deion is obviously isolated cover guy, fucking incredible. But there's more to play in defense and cornerback than just that. And notoriously had no interest in tackling.
No. He was a cover guy. He wasn't there to tackle anybody. He wasn't there to hurt old Deion. Exactly. No doubt. But he also played both ways, baseball and football. I mean, he was actually a pretty solid baseball player like Bo Jackson. Very few of those guys pull that off. Michael Jordan.
Freak athlete.
He also played on the offensive side of the ball towards the middle of his career with the Cowboys and even on the 49ers, I believe.
Well, so did Devin Hester, all right?
So Devin Hester, here's the thing. Devin Hester, when the Bears tried to convert him to wide receiver, nothing burger. But then when he went to Atlanta, and then he had some other supporting cast when he had the Roddy White and Julio Jones on the other side, Devin Hester actually wasn't too bad of a wide receiver in Atlanta. Not great. He wasn't great, but he did what he was supposed to do.
He's like Cordell Patterson. You got to use him in the right way. They're not going to be conventional guys. You need an Andy Reid style coach to know how to utilize guys like that.
Those are the guys where you get them in there for 5 plays a game or something, and you scheme to get them on a wide open end around or something. You scheme to get them a screen that they can have some space to operate in, but they're not because that doesn't take the skill set of running routes that people have been working on for years and years and years. You know what I mean? So. Yeah,
Jeremy says that Deion is the GOAT defensive back. I agree with that. But a matchup he and Moss, it would be also interesting because what Deion's strength was preventing wide receivers from creating space. Moss's space was his ball location and height. And that's not necessarily anything Deion could quite defend against necessarily. And so that's why if you put them one-on-one, well, I think talent-wise they were the best at their position during their time period. Moss probably does win more of his fair share of those, depending on how they use him.
How often did Jerry Rice and Deion Sanders meet up?
He played for both the 49ers and the Cowboys. So that's but Rice would be the kind of guy that Deion would shut down because Rice was such a great route runner. It was all about creating space, and Deion's ridiculous recovery speed is what made that so impossible. If the way you created space wasn't your route running or your quickness, that's where Deion could potentially have trouble. But I don't recall him facing many big, physical, super talented receivers during his day. A lot of the receivers were more your Jerry Rice style, your great route runners, or your physical underneath guys. Unless I'm blanking, maybe somebody in the chat will remember somebody that he matched up against that.
So I love this. Over the 10 games that Deion Sanders and Jerry Rice played against each other, Rice averaged 6 catches, 105 yards, and a touchdown.
That's still pretty darn good. Now, the question is, was Deion matched up against him in each one of those matchups that he got free?
Right.
Yeah, I guess it depends.
Over how many games though?
10 games.
10 games, only 100 yards receiving.
No,
one
that's
touchdown?
the average.
Oh, average. Oh, average. Okay.
He
The other
averaged
hard
106 yards. Yeah.
with defending Rice was 49ers were great at lining him up all over the field. So it was tough to line up. I mean, so many corners defend one particular position. It's even more so these days where, you have a slot corner, you have an outside corner, et cetera, that Rice was tough to just stick one guy on because of how the 49ers were really good at moving him around.
Well, and you remember back in the Seahawk Legion of Boom, Richard Sherman, he wouldn't move, right? He wouldn't follow people around. He would just stay on that one side.
And my recollection, that's what Deion did most of the time too, because you can't line him up inside because he's not going to help on run defense.
Yep, exactly. It's weird how that works, isn't it? But yeah, like Deion Sanders, obviously fucking elite. We talked about it before. I got a lot of shit from the chat. I would take a guy like a Champ Bailey. I would take a guy like a Charles or even Rod Woodson over Deion, but just slightly. Deion's obviously still a top 3 guy all time. But
it also depends on the rules you're playing with. Like Deion would probably be better today than he was back then because Deion didn't rely on physicality. And back then
he was just relying on footwork and speed, and that would be good today.
Yeah, because now you can't have the illegal It's why Nick Saban's corners don't always adjust well to the league. Or have sometimes they get moved to safety or things like that. Saban picks corners and defense. This would be a good transition to college football briefly. Saban likes his corners to be very physical downfield, which you can be in college. There's no illegal contact rule in college, and they're real loose on interference. And when they do call it, it's not a spot foul. It's a 15-yard penalty. In contrast, once they changed those rules is why the NFL became such a quarterback-driven league, is because you couldn't hit him low, you couldn't hit him late, you couldn't hit him high. Not only that, you couldn't touch a receiver past 5 yards downfield. Now, a guy like Deion, that would have been perfectly suited for him. So he would have even been more effective back then. Whereas, Champ Bailey needed his physicality, very good helping up. And during part of the league when you could be physical downfield, you could be a top corner. When you couldn't, it's why Woodson was not. They had to move him to safety late in his career. He was never very quick. Yeah. And he was always better in colder weather environments where you get away with pushing downfield more often, even in the illegal contact era. But, that a change that happened because Belichick did it to Manning's teams all the time. They would push a lot downfield and interrupt those passing routes.
Oh, yeah.
And the league changed the rules. But, speaking of Nick Saban, the big game of the college football week is going to be Alabama rolls into Knoxville. It used to be the third Saturday in October. I consider it a little bit heretical that it's played at any other time, but the SEC has no real respect for tradition at the commissioner's office, unfortunately. Now, even though I'd love to see Tennessee win this game, it's Tennessee's biggest rivalry. Phil Fulmer, during his tenure, owned Alabama. That's why us older traditional Tennessee fans were strong Fulmer supporters most of the time. Unfortunately, Tennessee is a scheme team, both offensively and defensively. Great game against LSU. LSU kind of blew that in a bunch of ways. Poor fourth down decisions, poor special teams.
How is LSU? How are they even ranked 25th? I don't understand what's going on with that team.
A couple of weeks ago, he said Kentucky's overrated. I think they're out of the top 25 when they were right in the top 10. Didn't make sense. Said Arkansas is overrated when they were in the top 10. Now they're not even in the top 25. But I think as long as Bryce Young plays, Alabama, the talent differential is massive. And usually when these scheme teams step up big in talent, they tend to get crushed. So I hope that doesn't happen. But I think realistically it's what, somebody in the chat said roll tide. I think unfortunately it probably will be roll tide. Plus this has been a road favorite. In other words, the road team covers disproportionately in this historical rivalry in these series. I think Saban took a big gamble holding Bryce Young out on the A&M game, and he was one bad play by Haynes King away from basically losing to A&M again, back-to-back seasons. But I think the reason he did it was to have Young fully available for this one. And talent-wise, the gap is pretty massive between Alabama and Tennessee. So it will require a mini miracle for us to pull off an upset. I would love to see it, but I just don't anticipate it.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. I feel like these first couple games of the first 6 weeks or whatever of the season, we've seen a lot of flip-flopping at the number one spot without any losses, which it's not something we usually see, typically at least, but it's happened a couple times. We've seen Alabama struggle at Texas. Georgia hopped up there. Then Georgia struggled. Then Alabama hopped back up. Now after Alabama struggles with an injured Bryce Young, Georgia hops back up. And even Ohio State skips over Alabama. Alabama now down to the number 3 team in the country.
Good for Nick Saban.
Yeah.
He's going to get to use last week. Now, his backup quarterback, unlike his past backup quarterbacks, what's slipping at Alabama with the recruiting success of programs like Georgia and others is their depth is no longer the same. And his backup quarterback is just a runner. He struggles to throw the ball. And so if he's there, Tennessee could absolutely pull the upset. But if Bryce Young plays, I think it's going to be unfortunate.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But we did also have – we got to talk about Oklahoma a little bit because they lose their coach. They have a good couple first games of this season, and people are thinking, hey, we're Oklahoma. We're going to be okay. It has been a rough past 3 weeks for them. And what did they end up losing, like 42-0 or something?
49-0. Worst loss, I believe, in the rivalry's history. First time they shut out since 1984. And I haven't seen Sooners get ravaged like that since they got ambushed by the Comanches about a century or so ago. So it's it tells you something about Brent Venables. The first-year coaches do tend to struggle, and we've seen in recent years because of the transfer portal and NOIs and the rest that some coaches have adjusted much quicker than people anticipated. But you look at Cristobal at Miami, really struggling, lost again last week to North Carolina at home. And while MTSU turned around and lost its next 2 games, so that looks worse in retrospect. And then you see Oklahoma. It's one thing to lose. Thank God he had Scott Frost early in the season to give him a psychic boost amongst his home base with that kind of rivalry. And he was without Dylan Gabriel for most of TCU and all of Oklahoma. In college, they get away with lying so much about the injuries, right? Even though it impacts the gambling odds, Will Levis was supposed to play last week for Kentucky, and then like a couple of hours before game time, they're like, oh, maybe he's out. It's like, what? And that's how they lose to South Carolina at home. So they get away. That's how you get inside intel if you have locker room connection still and influence they shouldn't allow it. Ends up, given how much gambling is taking place, they should start to require NFL-style injury disclosures. It's why the NFL injury report exists. It exists primarily for betting purposes so that nobody can get an edge by knowing who practiced, who didn't, who's hurt, who's not. And that's why they have questionable, doubtful, probable, out, etc. But I think that he's going to need to turn it around. Losing that bad to your big rival, Texas, and Texas not looking great this year. Decent, but not great. Quinn Ewers was back. But 49-0, that's embarrassing.
Especially when USC is, turned it around so quick. They do look really good.
Undefeated.
Undefeated. It'll be interesting to see what they do the rest of the way. UCLA, also a team that I don't think that people thought was going to be where they are.
I had 4 bets. I actually had 6 bets on them in back-to-back weeks, all 6 cashed, including home underdogs. Back-to-back. It's the Pac-12. But this is DTR. I think it seems like he's been there for 25 years. You have the COVID year, so everybody gets an extra year these days. That's just enough for Chip Kelly to execute well. And Utah's defense is not what it used to be. They lost a lot of people off the offseason. They don't have a lot of talent. They develop talent well, but they don't have natural recruiting talent. And they're a year behind having a competent secondary. And then Washington, everybody was hyping them. After they lose to UCLA, they go to Arizona State and lose to Arizona State. So it's a wild year in college football so far. The elite teams look like the elite teams when they're healthy. A little near scare for Georgia 2 weeks ago against Mizzou. But the Mizzou was unable to pull it off. But then last week, they probably began the packing plans for Brian Harsin in Auburn. I think he is the next coach to go. I think they have an off week after Ole Miss, so the belief is that he will be fired after it's anticipated they lose to Ole Miss next week. And I think that will accelerate because of the Rhule firing. There'll be people with big money, big pockets. Now, Matt Rhule would be crazy to go to Auburn given its off-field booster problems. That's why nobody gives you any time there. But it'll be mighty tempting for someone like Rhule to go to the SEC, to go to Auburn, one of the storied college football programs. And I guarantee you there's boosters already saying if we fire Harsin faster, we'll win the Matt Rhule sweepstakes. Remember last year, Clay Helton was hired after he got canned like a month later at Georgia Southern. So the whole wait until the season's end in the early recruiting era, that era is probably over. Expect to see more. Matt Rhule is the biggest coach that can be hired because Lance Leopold's at Kansas, not going to say he's leaving during the season. So that means, if Wisconsin's thinking about it, if Nebraska's thinking about it, but especially if Auburn wants to get in on those sweepstakes, Brian Harsin may be fired if he loses to Ole Miss this week.
Yeah,
UCLA and USC both being undefeated, they're making a really good case for them joining the Big Ten in 2 years. Because if they sucked, it'd be what are they doing here? Why are you going to the Big Ten for a stiffer competition when you can't even hang in the Pac-12? But both of those universities being undefeated, showing why they deserve to make that transfer over to the Big Ten.
It's going to make the Big Ten West better than something like watching Iowa and Illinois.
Yeah,
9-6.
There's some with the Big Ten. It's been some boring football at times, that's for sure. One team that hasn't been boring is Ohio State, and Ohio State crushed a team that's been probably one of the biggest disappointments Big Ten wise, which is Michigan State.
And people ask, could Mel Tucker be fired? There's about, I think it's 50 million or so reasons why no. He too, how he got such a contract when he had one good year in his whole coaching tenure is amazing to me. But he's got another one of those massive buyout contracts such that they would have to suck for years to come in order to be able to bounce back. And Michigan State sports isn't quite at the peak at the moment because of their certain people involved in their program some years ago and some of their behavior has put the sports program under a sort of a negative light. So the AD isn't overly sympathetic to the concerns of the football fans at the moment.
Yeah, who cares about gymnastics? Nobody watches that. Everybody cares about football and basketball at Michigan State. But yeah, that's for sure. What do you think about Ohio State, though, moving up to number 2? Do you think that's deserved based on their performance this year? They haven't really had that tough of a schedule. Like a game like that should have been a test on most years. That Michigan State game would be a test for Ohio State. It wasn't this year. Yeah,
it's very much a 2-game schedule. Notre Dame's getting better, but their offense still sketchy. They held on against BYU, but didn't look great doing it. Beat up on Carolina, but Carolina has no defense to speak of, which makes Miami's offense even look worse. And Van Dyke, not exactly the first rounder everybody was talking about. But I think that in my view preseason was that the best odds were Ohio State and Georgia to win the national title. Ohio State partially due to talent, but mostly due to schedule. That I'm still not a believer that Michigan's an elite program. I think Michigan is overrated, but it may not matter because they're not going to play anybody. Penn State can beat them, but their only real opponent on the year is Ohio State. It's a 1-game season for Michigan. So they don't. That was like that year Michigan Ohio State were 1-2, and I was like, neither one of these teams are that great. And everybody was demanding a rematch in the national title instead of Florida getting a shot. And then Florida went out and did what SEC underdogs do in national title games. They beat the living crap out of their opponent. That those teams were not that great. Troy Smith. I mean, who remembers him? So I think that the defense is not quite as good as I thought it would be under Jim Knowles, but it's getting there, and the offense is still very explosive and one of the most explosive. Now, my favorite thing was the week before, where the Rutgers coach and the Ohio State coach almost ended up in open fisticuffs.
Yeah.
That was like that. That was partially because Ohio State was, kind of running it up the score late.
It was a fake punt with like when they were up 40 or something in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. They're up. It was like right around. But nobody was talking about it. It's Ryan Day cares about the spread. I think they were up 39, and depending on where you got as an Ohio State fan, you might have got it at 39.5 or 40. So Ryan Day's like, hey, got to take care of my fans, and the Rutgers coach not happy about that. He's infamous for having a bad temper. He almost got hired at Tennessee, but then he didn't because we were like, whoa, this guy's got some issues. He and Ryan Day used to coach together on the sidelines at Ohio State. So that was fun. Seeing the Houston coach 2 weeks ago scream at his own fans because they're he's just yelling and cussing at him in the crowd, which was great. They came back and won a shocker against Memphis. I think they were down by like 20 points or something with like 5 minutes left, and they came back and won somehow. So some of those games have been fun in college football. But I think the elite programs are the elite programs for a reason. And Bryce Young, if he's back, I have a hard time seeing 3 of the 4 not being Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. The real question is the 4th. And right now, as you mentioned, that's most likely going to be USC, if you look at the map. If you look at who's the most like, it's not going to be a Big 12 program. ACC, Clemson struggled for a while against Boston College. I just don't see the ACC. Miami's down clearly. Maybe Clemson inch it, but if Clemson and USC both finish undefeated, USC will go to the playoffs, not Clemson.
Yeah, I do think that's where we're looking at heading right now, which would be interesting. Lincoln Riley and Beardo's USC Trojans potentially coming back in his first year. That'd be huge. That'd be fucking massive.
Yeah, I think they deserve to be right back, right up there. That's for sure.
One X factor is that Caleb Williams, ever since Oregon State put up that defensive scheme, that offense is still good, but it's not putting up elite numbers like it was. And that was his problem last year in the second half of the season at Oklahoma. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. The question is, who in the Pac-12 is going to expose that? Is there a defense in the Pac-12? Oregon's secondary is not good. Their run defense is solid, but Georgia proved their secondary is non-existent. Washington doesn't have a good pass defense. Washington State at times does, but that's more by scheme, not by talent. And so you look at, and of course USC won that game last week and covered ultimately. So I think that I don't see anybody exposing USC in the regulars. Yeah, I think though Caleb Williams has issues, but they probably won't get exposed until the playoffs.
We do have a comment about California college sports right here. The Greg for $5. Daily reminder that UCLA runs college football world. Make UCLA great again. Fire Chip Kelly yesterday. See, you're fired Chip Kelly. I don't know if that's a meme from the Greg that he's been saying this for 3 years now. So I don't know if he still thinks that way in all seriousness.
I'll respect UCLA football when they can manage to at least have their stadium half full for a conference game that's not at night.
I'll tell you what, around here, UCLA football, it's almost like a punchline. It's almost kind of a joke. UCLA, it's a lot of people making fun of UCLA the past few years.
Is it like the Chargers?
Almost, yeah.
The San Diego Chargers that are pretending to be in LA?
Yeah.
But hey, Justin Herbert, give him credit coming back against the Browns last week. I mean, this guy's he's starting to recover, but still not 100% there, but the dude's a gamer.
Jacoby Brissett, this is like the third straight week that he's thrown a horrific interception right at the end when they had a chance to win.
Yep.
Like, they're looking forward. Deshaun Watson got back in the building today. No word if there were any masseuses present, but Deshaun Watson did come back today. He's allowed to practice with the team. It's going to be interesting to see what state this team's in because they are being very competitive. And they've got a hell of a run game. And I think Amari Cooper's ready for Deshaun Watson to be there, no doubt. I forgot to actually talk in any detail other than talking about Mitch Trubisky, but Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills absolutely dominated the Steelers. Josh Allen had 360 yards passing in the first half.
He had 4 touchdowns in the first half.
Yeah, he had 12. He had 12 yards per play or something at one point. I was like, this is absurd.
Ridiculous.
So much for the great Steeler defense. So I think Tomlin has got a long leash there because of his tenure. I've never actually been a big Tomlin fan. If you look at him against quality coaches, his record's actually not very good. He does good against subpar coaches within the division, especially. But I don't think they'll be getting rid of Tomlin anytime soon, given the way the Steelers operate under the Rooney family, and given that Tomlin's, he's entitled to probably at least 2 more years.
I don't think Tomlin will ever be fired. He leaves Pittsburgh on his terms. I don't see the Steelers front office or ownership getting rid of Tomlin ever. As long as Tomlin wants to coach there, he'll be there.
You don't think the team that's virtue signaled harder about social justice will fire the longest tenured black head coach in the NFL?
You know what's crazy is that Brian Flores currently has a lawsuit against the NFL, and he's currently on the Pittsburgh Steelers coaching staff. Yep. I think that's fucking wild.
I mean, Colin Kaepernick said that they're slavers, and he wants to desperately to get back in, supposedly. So the hypocrisy knows no bounds with some of these people.
Well, Flores sure didn't help him last week against Buffalo.
Yeah. Blue-eyed Scorpio for $5. Ryan, you were saying us Bronco fans are crazy because of the Tebow stuff. The thing is, Tebow had the greatest bounce pass in NFL history, hands down. You are probably right about that. Probably right about that, Blue-Eyed Scorpio. And then over on Rumble, thank you guys for hanging out on Rumble. Roll Rat for a buck. The Richard Sherman postgame rant about Wilson was fucking full unbreaded. Dude went totally off script, and it was something beautiful.
A little shout out to Nick Ricada, who was temporarily banned by the commies at YouTube until enough court of public opinion got back out. But it is amazing how that unbreaded thing just keeps going viral.
Yeah, Nick is a man who he's a trendsetter, right? So when he gets his audience, when he gets them on a meme, it will never stop. And it's good to see Nick and the numbers he was doing on Rumble. I don't know if that's going to stay that way every single stream where he's not like got kicked off of YouTube for it, but there is such a big audience over on Rumble. We multi-stream to Rumble every single stream, if you guys aren't aware. So we are over there. I was impressed with the numbers we had too. Got up to like 480 or something on YouTube, which for this stream, that's fucking fantastic. And that's what we love to see. So we appreciate you guys hanging out for sure.
Raiders up on the Chiefs 7-0. Derek Carr had a 58-yard touchdown pass to Devontae Adams.
Devontae, well, there you go. Well, that game has started. I know there's already something going on, but do you have any picks or anything or predictions for the game right now, Robert?
Not on this one. This one I thought the spread was about right. You know, the Kansas City at 7. If I leaned any direction, it'd be a little bit at Kansas City, but you know, I wouldn't. I would put it at 7. That's where I would put the spread. I would put the total at 51. I thought there might be some value I thought it would go higher because Chiefs totals have been really high the last several years, and they're in the right spots. They've been a moneymaker, but this one I thought was about right. So. I think the Raiders can get things going offensively. I mean, they have clearly the skill set and capabilities to do so. They've just been sporadic this year. It should be a fun, exciting game. It shouldn't be an 11-12, 9-6, 12-9. Some of these awful ones we've seen on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday Night Football.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of that and speaking of sports picks and sports betting, where can people go for all the information they would ever want to know about football, college, and NFL?
Yes, for the most affordable sports handicap site in the country, especially at the rate of return for our members, double their money last year, up over 50% bankroll this year. Sportspicks.locals.com put out, and unlike a lot of your handicappers that give you like 3 picks or 4 picks, in order to increase the entertainment value and educational value, on average, we put up about 100 picks every single week. College football, NFL, English Premier League. We're going to be adding some teaser picks to the NFL. We're going to be adding some other stuff, some individual prop player picks, so that you can enhance your informative value. You can enhance your entertainment value. You have a little bit of skin in the game. And ideally, and as has been the case for our members over the last 2 years, make money while you're doing it.
There you go. Check out sportspicks.locals.com. Beardo, what are you doing? Where can people check you out?
So actually tonight, I'm not sure how many of the Sports Wars viewers are into video games or anything like that, but tonight, me and Alaska Man Jeff, we have a very exciting Red Dead Redemption 2 roleplay stream. It was very successful last Monday night. Me and Jeff pretty much practicing our voice acting, go full-blown into cowboy character, doing our voice acting. A lot of people liked it, enjoyed it last Monday, so we're bringing it back this Monday night. It'll be 10 o'clock Pacific time, so 10 o'clock on the West Coast. It'll be about 1 o'clock in the morning out just because, I'm going to watch the game tonight, probably do a Sports Wars recap of tonight's game. But, so if you guys want to tune in for that Red Dead Redemption 2 Cowboy Roleplay live stream, it'll be tonight, 10 p.m. Pacific time on my Twitch channel, Fear the Beardo on Twitch. I'm also Fear the Beardo on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And Sports Wars, subscribe to Sports Wars.
Boom. Thanks for being here, man. We did get one more super chat from the Greg. Hey, guy, Rose Bowl holds like 80 to 90,000. USC can't even sell out the Dump Coliseum. It's a traffic, location, etc. thing. 45,000 the last few games. Fire Chip Kelly. Fire the man with the cigar.
Well, I can tell you is in Knoxville, 90,000 is small change. We got over 100,000 that are going to be filling out this weekend like they do pretty much every weekend. And traffic's no hindrance if you're a real college football fan.
I will say there is something different about California sports that I was not ready for when I moved there. Being somebody from the Midwest, someone who goes out to watch Bears games in this snow. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's 100 degrees, 100% humidity in the summer to go out to a Cubs game, or whether it's 0 degrees, snow, Soldier Field. I'm out there, right? Whether it's college, professional, whatever. It's a big difference going to Southern California, and you got people that like show up in the 4th inning of a Padres game and then leave in the 6th. It's just like, there's like no, it's just not as intense. Maybe it's because there's more shit to do like throughout. Maybe it's because it's just a different atmosphere, but it's a different attitude in Southern California. There's no doubt. And then the Greg says it's true. We're soft. There it is. But all right, guys, thank you for being here. Go check out Monday Night Football, Chiefs versus Raiders, and we'll talk to you next week. Peace.